Welcome back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk yet again. Drago Bosnic. It is late, sometime in the afternoon, night, evening, morning. We don't even know yet. We've been recording for so long. It all seems like a blur. What is it? April, May? Who knows? It doesn't matter. I was chatting to Von Festus, the U.S. tanker who I've had on, and he's also in chat. And it was like some ridiculous time at night, and I was like, I'm gonna go sleep, and I have to wake up early. He's like, yeah, man, just nap and like come back to the circus. Like, come back, just nap, come back to the circus. That's how it goes every night, and it really has become a circus. Drago, welcome to the circus. I mean, welcome to this talk. Like, share, subscribe. This is a comedy show, nothing to do with reality.
Yeah, of course.
And this shirt is not a political statement. It is a moral statement.
Man, you're also an extremist. That's terrible.
I've been wanting to get to this video for too long, and considering it's the first thing that I've got loaded up here, I wasn't the first thing that I was planning to play, but considering it's the first thing, this is the new U.S. ambassador in Serbia, courtesy of Nimakata, who shared this, in National Meme Coordination Body. Telo is body, so it's Nimakab in English, which doesn't make much sense. Anyway, let's hear from this guy. I forgot what his name is. I should probably learn his name. Maybe get an interview with him one day. Maybe he'd like to sit down for a talk, show me some tips and tricks.
It's Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich. We've gotten a lot of calls, a lot of emails, but there's one thing people definitely want to see. They want to see more Chucks. So people, you want more Chucks? You got more Chucks.
Like, I already see the cringe hand trying to strangle me, man, through the fucking screen. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Maybe I just made a diplomatic incident. I don't know.
I don't know what diplomatic incident you're talking about, because I'm about to go. Możesz dana puścić Clintonie. So.
Oh yeah. I can say the same thing. I was actually singing that as a kid. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I still
Nobody
sang,
did,
so.
man. None of us did. It's like the kids on the balconies who are like dingy dingy donging. They don't know what the fuck it means.
Yeah, but I'm glad that I was manipulated into saying that instead of like ousting my government or something.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Anyway, it's those things that you just said. I remember that, like, those were the best days when we were all like one. The entire Serbian people were united in their resistance to freedom and democracy. I guess we were not educated enough on democracy to accept it and embrace it. We were resisting, and we're still resisting. I don't know why, man. We should just give up and roll over because that's what all the civilized people do.
Yeah. I don't know much about Serbian history because, unfortunately, or fortunately, or c'est la vie, as I like to think of it, I was taught in the British and American school systems. But I do know enough about Serbian history to know that we don't roll over. And even if it looks like we rolled over, we didn't. The Turks found that out 500 years later. So, yeah. What can I say? You had some things when we finished recording the last one. This is, by the way, officially Drago's article about NATO's aggression against the world, Serbia to Russia, part 1 continued, going into part 2 because Drago wanted to round off some little few details that might take 15 to 27 minutes, depending on if he tells you like 12% of the story or like
I skipped the details. If people want to know the details, they could just read the articles. And I got to warn you, it's going to take some time. Especially because I also used a lot of links relevant links that are actually proving what we're saying in the article. So what we talked about in the last talk was the F-117, and one of the things that the mainstream propaganda machine was trying to present to everyone is that we got lucky. That evil Serbs got lucky. The Americans were too overconfident, and so on and so on. In reality, it's not true. What really happened is that we had very, very good professionals and patriotic soldiers who were ready to risk their lives to get these things off our backs and from our skies, because they were dropping freedom and democracy on our people. So I also want to point out, there were hospitals and schools and even maternity wards that got hit by the bombs dropped from F-117 specifically. So 20 years later, or actually 21 years later, there was an American pilot, namely Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Tuna Hainline, who admitted that we hit another F-117, which was the proof that we didn't get lucky. We actually knew what we were doing, and we used 50-year-old technology from the former Soviet Union to shoot down, the latest tech at the time. And this was, of course, confirmed by a number of Serbian generals and colonels and other high-ranking officers I had the honor of speaking to. And of course, this was just the kinetic part of the warfare. When the 26th commemoration was happening, of course, as I said, you were there, you were helping me. We were both helping Professor Chostadovsky, who said a lot of things. There were also, former top-ranking officials of Serbia and Yugoslavia at the time who were present, and they were also presenting what happened to our people. There were also military attaches and ambassadors and representatives of friendly countries, namely Russia, Belarus, Cyprus, Cuba, and China. And of course, Professor Chostadovsky was one of the guests of honor. So another thing I want to point out for people who might not know Serbian, obviously that's most of your audience. We have in the article, we have the videos of everyone who were talking at the conference, and including a Serbian archbishop whose name is Irine, and he was like, if you listen to what he says, you will probably never find a guy saying so much with so little words, and he was basically quoting Orwell and the Bible at the same time, which is not easy to do. And he pretty much talked about not just the moment when Serbia got bombed, but also that we were the first to resist the ones who were trying to push us into this so-called transhuman future. And this is what he said. I'm quoting what he said. So it's very difficult for most people to even think about transhumanism and the NATO bombing of Serbia. Like, what does that have to do with anything, right? But actually, the same people who were imposing all the mainstream bullshit on you today are the people who bombed our country and our people nearly 3 decades ago. So obviously, that could just be a coincidence, right? So what Professor Chostadovsky was actually talking about was the economic aspect of the warfare, and that's now the second part of my article regarding the bombing and the attack on Yugoslavia. I'm going to be brief in this case because I don't want to bother people with economic details. But the point is,
hey, some people are economists, man. Some people like economic details. They're not all military analysts and enthusiasts of humor.
Yeah, of
so
course.
Go ahead. Go as far as you want.
If you like economics, go read the second part. You're gonna just knock yourself out, because the Professor Chostadovsky, being an economic expert and a professor at like a half a dozen or a dozen universities around the world, he actually talked about this a lot. He explained how the Bretton Woods institutions are while pretty much preparing the first phase of war against a certain country. And before NATO comes in, to bring freedom and democracy, there's always this economic warfare that makes sure that your country is, well, pretty fucked up before the actual bombs start falling. And we've seen that in.
You mean like Iran has been under sanctions for forever, and like Syria has been like under sanctions for forever, and how like Gaddafi was under sanctions for like forever, and like how Russia is, and North Korea, and oh wait, North Korea got a nuke. Damn it.
Yeah. Fuck. Like now we can't implement freedom and democracy there. Really, like it's just so sad.
Poor people.
Poor people.
By the way, North Korea is opening to tourism this year, so that'll be good. I'm thinking of maybe going down to North Korea for like summer vacation. That should be an interesting cultural exchange. Yeah, sorry, you were talking about the economic warfare against.
Like I'm not. This is
former
like
Yugoslavia.
I'm like skipping over like 80% of the article of the second part, because all of that is pretty much explains what happened in terms of economic warfare. This includes, of course, the policies imposed by the IMF and the World Bank. So in the late 1980s, in some period of time, we had 600,000 people losing their jobs in production economy on a daily basis. So can you imagine in a country of like 22 million people, if 600,000 people lose their jobs in the production economy, you can imagine how devastating that would be. Like if we had to compare it to, let's say, the US, which has 350 million people, it's like, what is it, like 10 million people losing their jobs in a single day, and like every single day for the next, I don't know, several months. That's the number of people losing their jobs. So that's how insane the economic crisis in Yugoslavia was. And it was not a natural event. It was not like something that, that was like a natural process occurring because of actual economic problems.
Listen,
no.
I like to say to anybody who says the Soviet Union collapsed and the collapse of Yugoslavia, it's like, if you believe that the World Trade Center collapsed, then yes, these things collapsed. But to anybody who knows a little bit about controlled demolition, there was a lot more thermite in Yugoslavia and the USSR than there was with World Trade Center.
Exactly. So this is what happened to our country.
It
wasn't a natural process. It was all engineered. Just like other stuff were engineered. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going to say the same thing that you did. There's no fucking way that those things went down through controlled demolition. The only logical explanation is that two planes, crashed them down, and a bird probably got the Tower 7 because we didn't see it. But anyway, that's the only logical explanation. So
live update from Nimakita chat. It didn't last long. We opened up we ended the last talk with them opening up their chat and cleaning it out, and then soon after the bots swarmed so fast that the chat was closed. So yeah, all these issues that we are discussing here are very how can I say, important things that are happening on the world stage. It's just that we're doing it through memes and in chat rooms of memes and in comment sections of Instagram posts, because that is the front line of people's minds.
Yep. Well, I mean, it really is. So yeah, I mean, the economic warfare, when it was done, then of course everything was ready for the kinetic phase, and that was when the war started, the so-called civil war. Not NATO invasion, obviously, because just like in Syria, it's all a civil war, because we're all savages. We like to kill each other, just like Syrians, because we have nothing better to do, right? And all the other, countries that got into civil wars.
Don't be racist. Don't forget the Iraqis. They also kill each other.
Oh, yeah. I forgot the Iraqis. Like all of these, nations that had like, civilizations 5,000 years ago, they're all savages. They just like to kill each other. Yeah. This is what happened to us as well. So yeah, when the kinetic phase was over, now they needed legal reasons to explain how all this happened. So that's when the Hague Tribunal came in, and decided to prosecute all the evil guys. And that's how, the butcher of the Balkans, Slobodan Milosevic, appeared, just like the Bashar al-Assad was the butcher of Syria. So, yeah, I mean, of course, we need to take care of democracy, obviously. And that was the time when Milosevic was getting treatment for things that he wasn't, that he didn't have, namely leprosy. They were giving him, while he was at The Hague, they were giving him a cure for leprosy, even though he had no. No, I'm not joking. I'm serious. Like, they were giving him this thing that actually exacerbated his heart issues. So he complained about the fact that he was being poisoned, and he requested Russian doctors to come to see him. That was on March 8, 2006. 3 days later, he died before the Russian doctors got the chance to see him and to check up on him.
They basically killed him with leprosy medication?
Yep. Among other stuff, but leprosy medication was the most dangerous one that contributed the most to his heart issues. And he knew it. He was being poisoned through food, obviously. And he was also denied the right to self-defense because, interestingly, he knew exactly what was going on. And, in order to make sure that he never got the chance to say what he wanted to say, he was assigned to what is called amicus curiae, or just, friends of the court. They were two British lawyers who were assigned to defend him, even though their defense, well, I mean, I don't know what to compare it with, really. Like,
you can compare it to the new EU scheme for the savings from the EU Commission, where they're going to where Europe needs to take the lead in stealing people's savings and investments, and they're going to turn. This is from National Meme Coordination Body yet again. So, good morning, sunshine. She's gonna milk the European Union pensions.
Comparison, just as I was speaking, and it's almost as if we were, aiming to do this. But no, seriously, like it's a very good coincidence because you didn't know I was kind of going to talk about this. Anyway, it's a good comparison. The same people who are like going to fucking rob you, they want to protect you. That's pretty much what happened to Milosevic at The Hague. So he refused this, obviously. Professor Chosudovsky was actually supposed to testify in his favor, but because at the time he was still, being denied, Milosevic was being denied the right to self-defense, Professor Chosudovsky refused to take part in this because he knew he would be used against his friend, because he considered President Milosevic a friend. So the whole point is it was orchestrated, right? And this is what I actually talked about when I talked about ICC at RT. These so-called international justice institutions are designed to exonerate the West from their responsibility for various democratic acts around the world, and to blame it on the locals, So if you're an African, Latin American, Middle Eastern, a person from former Yugoslavia, or maybe a Russian or a Ukrainian, it's your fault that your country got destroyed. There is no way that the West was involved in that. And it's very likely you're going to be convicted for war crimes, because obviously what else are you going to do than to be a war criminal because you're not civilized or democratic enough, right? So that's what happened to us, obviously. And then, when all this was done, when Milosevic was dead, well, they just closed the case, and nothing happened. And even though he was never convicted, well, fuck it, he died. Just happened like that. And then
he's still labeled as a war criminal, or known as a war criminal, and Serbs are still Muslim killers and war criminals, and so on and so forth. And it's interesting from a Serb who lived abroad way to look at your telling of the story versus my experience of the story of, like, you know, Slobo the Muslim killer.
Yeah.
You know, having grown up among Muslims and all that stuff. And having been exposed to all of this narrative when it was actual, not like looking back on it like historically, and like, you know, the Butcher of the Balkans and all these names like Jamie Shea and Javier Solana, and let's not go through all of them. But yeah, they're like burnt in from my childhood, and we were discussing this the other day, that you were like 5 and I was like, you know, or you were like 7 or something and I was like 12 or 15 or whatever I was. But it happened over a decade, so, you know, I was many years over the decade.
Yeah.
Almost 10.
Yeah, but you know, no matter how much time passes, some things never change. And I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same, as the saying goes. And this is exactly the case. You know, even though all this was happening 26 years ago to our country, I'm pretty sure a lot of people who know what happened to their countries will find patterns. You know, I know it's impossible to imagine, but yeah, there are patterns, because the same people, you know, did all this to us. So why would they change something that works, right? Because democracy, I mean, freedom and democracy, they work, obviously. So yeah, that was the second part. And I think the largest and probably the most interesting part is the third one, right?
Before we get to the third one, where am I? I just want to remind everybody, no, not that this is not eligible for monetization, even though it is not eligible for monetization, but I just want to remind everybody of the trope or the concept of, if it bleeds, it leads, which means in the news world, if 2 people die in your city and the local news has to write up the news, if there's 10 people who died in something bigger that happened somewhere further away, they're going to get the lead story, not the local news. Because if you know, I don't know how to say this, 25 freedom fighting KLA fighters were killed by brutal Serbian government repressive forces using modern means of suppressing terrorism. I mean, freedom fighting in a land far, far away that you never heard of. That's going to be at the top of your news cycle for like 25 years, maybe even like 70 years if you go back to Vietnam. I just want to remind everybody of, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. Before we get into the Don't Forget Yugoslavia Part 3. Evolution of NATO aggression against the world from Serbia to Russia. By the way, Russians, are you paying attention? If you're here from like the FSB or SVR or like CIA and you're on like the Russia desk, have a look at these articles. Learn some fucking history, like seriously speaking. And this goes all to like the Russian creators that may be watching, and those wannabe analysts who name their shows after things that we've mentioned here 2.5 years ago. Learn some history. Learn why Yugoslavia and the bombing of Yugoslavia and Serbia matter in the geopolitical context. Drago, you want to give them the short version? The like short version.
Yeah, I'm
of the
going to try
version?
to keep it as short as possible because this part has two, it has multiple segments, but it has like 2 main segments. That's like the part about, you know, some details about the kinetic warfare, and one very long part about the intelligence operations that were, you know, being conducted behind the scenes, obviously, because that's how you should conduct intelligence operations, and how a certain Serbian general single-handedly, upended NATO and stole their entire fucking war plan and postponed the bombing for like 6 or 7 months, something like that. Serbian Yugoslav services were quite powerful at the time, and I'm gonna get to that part. After I finish the kinetic one, So yeah, as we mentioned in the previous part, NATO was planning to destroy the Serbian army in about 96 hours. They were planning to inflict 20,000 losses or 20,000 casualties, or KIA specifically, on the largest Serbian army. That was this third army, specifically its Pristina Corps, which had around 120,000 soldiers, and I think around 30,000 police officers who were all militarized. Of course, they had military equipment in order to fight the Albanian freedom fighters. So I just want to say a few things. So there were around 50,000.
Before you get into that, you say they were fighting the Albanian freedom fighters.
Yeah.
You forgot that there were NATO special forces mixed in among them.
Yeah.
Like
I'm getting there.
Aww.
So.
Okay,
just want to say there were 50,000 terrorists at the very least of these Albanian terrorists. They were like operating within Serbia or within specifically within Kosovo. So they were attacking our forces. At the same time, in North Macedonia and Albania, there were around 50,000 NATO troops, including special forces that you just mentioned, that were actually trying to,
name the countries. Name the countries.
Yeah. To name all the countries, well, specifically,
no.
It was
the special forces guys. I know there was Germans. I know there was Italians. I know there was Dutch. Who else was there?
French. There was the French GIGN, if I'm not mistaken. There were. Did you mention Norwegians?
No.
There were Norwegians. There were, of course, the British, the American Delta Force. There were like several of these top tier 1 American special forces. I'm not sure about Navy SEALs. I know Delta was there. I think Navy SEALs were not involved in that because it was the U.S. Army that was deployed in that area, and of course, and the Navy SEALs are part of the Navy. So I'm not sure about them. They could have been deployed. I mean, the U.S. SOCOM or Special Operations Command. They have the right to, use any sort of special forces from any of the branches for any operation. So it's possible they were there, but I don't have any, solid evidence for that.
Wait.
So anyway,
do you get to the training accident that the Americans had with their Apaches in Albania also?
Yeah, I didn't mention that because none of the generals, because I was quoting them, none of the generals mentioned that. But yeah, there were training accidents with like several Apaches. And of course, whenever NATO loses an aircraft or anything, it's always like a bird strike or some sort of technical difficulties, because Serbian air defenses don't work, right? Serbian air defenses are shit. It's not like we shot down like 2 F-170s proven. I'm not going to get into details about the rest. So the whole point is we had 100,000 enemy soldiers deployed in an area that we were supposed to defend, while we were being bombed by 1,100 aircraft. And also 30 vessels that were firing cruise missiles at us, while we were being also, attacked from all sides. So yeah, like we were fighting a war against a far superior enemy that had total air dominance, and we were also fighting a ground war against an enemy that was being supported by this air force. So the whole point is, when the entire like military power of NATO and Serbia is compared, at the time it was the ratio was 600 to 1. So like they were 600 times more powerful than Serbia. That was, of course, that's without counting nuclear weapons, because if we don't count that, if we count that, then of course the ratio would be like infinite to 1.
And they still lost.
Yeah, and they still didn't win. The whole point is, of the 120,000 members of the Pristina Corps, they wanted to kill 20,000 in the first 96 hours. And of course, this failed. Do you know what happened? By the end of the entire war, like we had 1,100 dead soldiers and police officers, and only 400 of those were killed by NATO bombs. So yeah, like in 78 days, they killed 400 soldiers and police officers. instead of killing 20,000 in 96 hours, as they said. So yeah, so much for NATO's military effectiveness. Also, I want to mention in the border area with Albania, there were two areas, namely Koshare, which is like a mountain, and also there was like this cursed mountain, or Prokletija in Serbian, where there was an area called Pastrik, and Koshare and Pastrik were two areas where we were being constantly attacked by a combination of Albanian regular army supported by artillery, the KLA terrorists, and NATO special forces. And these areas were defended by Serbian conscripts. So guys who were actually serving, you know, like 9 months to a year in the military, and they were like 19, 20, 21 maybe, commanded by officers in their mid-20s to early 30s. And they were outnumbered 30-1 in this area. Well, of course, if you have a force of terrorists, you know, regular forces are supported by artillery, special forces from NATO countries equipped with the best equipment at the time, and supported by NATO air power, including strategic bombers, namely the B-52, you would expect that the guys who are outnumbered and outgunned in every single way would lose. Well, no, they didn't. They didn't lose. They held their ground. They stood their ground for the entire length of NATO aggression, and they never retreated until the last day, when they were forced to retreat by a political decision, but they never lost, militarily speaking. So yeah, there you go. That's the, of course, that's the kinetic part of the warfare. And also General Vladimir Lazarevic, one of the commanding officer of the Pristina Corps, he used an acronym which goes like this. It's called 4M, and it means maskirovka, which means masking, maneuvering, mobility, and morale. So those two things were the cornerstones of how successful our army was. So it was all about, you know, disguising. It was all about maneuvering constantly and being mobile to ensure that NATO can never, you know where exactly you are. And of course, morale being, you know, the high morale of our forces that never that refuse to back down and surrender to a far superior enemy. Superior, of course, technically, not in anything else. You know, like what NATO did against our forces, considering there were like 200,000 Serbian soldiers in all of Serbia, they killed less than 0.5% of our active duty military, even though they said that they would destroy like 60% to 90% in like less than a week. So yeah, that's how successful NATO was in the kinetic war. Another thing about the kinetic war that I wanted to mention, yeah, of course, we're talking about the third part. NATO was not just using conventional weapons against Serbia. It also was using what was called a low-intensity chemical and nuclear warfare. So they were using bombs and munitions with depleted uranium. And they were
before you get into the DU, because everybody knows about DU, or at least more about DU than some of the other things, I wanted to ask you about that. If you remember, but I'm sure you do because you're a military analyst, it's your job to remember these things. How they made, or they used at least for the first time, those special bombs that they dropped foil onto the power plants that would like disable and fry the power plants without destroying them totally. You want to maybe talk about that a little bit and then go into DU?
Yeah, of course. Like they were using these bombs to like destroy the entire power grid. But it wasn't just this, you know. They were actually targeting power plants, especially the refinery in Pančevo, which is a city very close to Belgrade. To cause chemical, like intentionally cause chemical pollution. So this is the part I wanted to mention just, and I'm going to go back to those the foil bombs that you mentioned. So they wanted to bomb chemical plants to intentionally cause pollution in Pančevo, and not just in Pančevo, but also other areas in Serbia. What we know, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people in Serbia have watched the movies about, or one of the recent movies that we saw about what happened in that city. So it was, this Pančevo refinery was hit by precision guided bombs, which means they knew what they were hitting. And the same goes for these, for virtually any other weapon that was used against our country. So when they drop a precision guided weapon, they know what they're shooting at, what they want to destroy. These foil bombs were designed to destroy power grids. And of course, this not only affected the economy, it also affected hospitals, schools. Like if a hospital, is going to function.
Man. Only Russian bombs affect hospitals and schools. American bombs are peaceful and loving, and they bring democracy and freedom and cancer-free treatments to democracy-loving peoples in hospitals and schools. Sorry, I had to. Go on.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, in all seriousness, that's exactly what they were doing. Like they wanted to make sure that. Because the entire military part failed, and of course this is what we just talked about and explained. Because all this failed, they decided, okay, fuck it, we can't destroy their military. They're too well dug in. They're too well masked. They move. We can't catch them off guard. Whatever. They decided, okay, let's go for the civilians. Because we have these massive cities, especially Belgrade. That are just there. They can't defend them because they don't have enough air defense missiles to cover the entire country. So let's just go and bomb Belgrade. And one of the reasons why Serbia was so, let's say, defeated in this war was the threat to bomb Belgrade. So for those who don't know, Belgrade has like 1.5 to 2 million people. And I mean, the city is not small by any means. Like it's on a fairly large surface area. However, you still have like a bunch of people who are living very close to each other. Like the density, the population density is still high enough to cause mass casualties in case of a mass bombing. And one of the things that they threatened to do in the last days of the bombing was, carpet bombing Belgrade. And that means like sending dozens of these B-52, B-2s and B-1s and these other bombers to devastate the city of the capital city of Serbia. So
the Americans, NATO was going to carpet bomb people? No,
yeah, I
man.
mean, they would never do that, obviously. So the projection was, and of course, projections about civilians and projections about soldiers are two different things. Soldiers are there to, they know that war is like the supreme danger. You can die, and you're very likely to die in such a war, so that what you're up for. But civilians are a different story. So if somebody tells you that the projection is that 500,000 people would die in Belgrade in a matter of weeks, you can't really play with this, because it's not like, even if it's 50,000 civilians who are going to die, how do you justify that? How do you present that to your people and say, let's just go for it, let's suck it up and continue fighting?
What you're trying to say basically is that Slobodan Milosevic was given an ultimatum where he was threatened with mass civilian casualties that he would have to explain away, which are a little bit harder to explain away than military casualties, which, as we've highlighted, there weren't that many of, which is why NATO, much like they're doing now in Ukraine or 404, because because they can't get any military victory, they're pushing for civilian deaths and horror by bombing Russians. Russians, are you paying attention, Russians? Can you please start paying attention, Russians? It's high time Russians start paying attention. Yeah, pay attention, Russians. Seriously.
Yeah. And when we say Russians, this also means Ukrainians, because we know who Ukrainians are. Yeah, I mean,
the Croats,
the entire thing is, The Finnish president Martti Ahtisaari, who was actually sent to Milosevic to explain that this would happen, and when Milosevic asked, like, what happens if we don't, agree to this ultimatum, he just like moved one of his glasses, on the table and just like did this, meaning that all of Belgrade is going to be like a parking lot. I just want to point out, Martti Ahtisaari actually got a Nobel Peace Prize for solving the question of Kosovo.
I was gonna ask because I pretty sure I remember that name from the era of names that I remember that I shouldn't remember as a child, or as a teen, let's say. Martti Ahtisaari. He always had a funny name. And yeah, I was gonna ask, didn't he get a Nobel Peace Prize? He did. Yeah.
Yeah.
We all know.
And he got it for resolving the issue of Kosovo by giving it to Albanians. Yeah, I know. It's impossible to imagine.
We all know why Obama got his what's it called, Peace Prize.
Conspiracy theorists like us would call this terrorism. I mean, if you're threatened, that your entire.
Where did you say that guy was from? The Ahtisaari guy? Finland, because you said Finland, and I got Scandinavian vibes immediately, and that reminded me of this meme, which I had loaded, so I have to pop this up. Free advice from National Meme Coordination Body. Don't discuss politics with your barber. This is some Estonian politician who's threatening Russia, by the way.
Let me guess, his barber is Russian.
He might be. Drago, what was I going to say? Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, you mentioned Ahtisaari, and I was like, wait, I was just going to ask, didn't he get a Nobel Peace Prize for solving world peace? How did that working out?
Yeah. I mean, the Nobel Peace Prize is the least politicized prize in the history of all prizes.
Come on, it's not like it's named after the guy who invented dynamite or anything.
I'm going to remember that. That's a very good point.
You just read too much. Just stop it. Stop reading.
I definitely should. Anyway, as I was saying...
No, we're not done. Go on.
As I was saying, if somebody comes to you and threatens to kill your civilians, conspiracy theorists would call that terrorism, but I call it freedom and democracy because that's what it is. Because, as NATO said, they were not bombing us Serbs; they were bombing Milosevic, and his regime. It seems all of us were part of his regime, according to NATO. Anyway, I'm digressing from freedom and democracy. I just want to say thank you, NATO, for getting rid of Milosevic for us, and for making our country so much better today.
Don't worry.
Anyway,
we'll pay you back soon. We'll pay you back soon. Vengeance comes when you least expect it, especially the holy kind. And, and
I'm looking forward to that day of freedom and democracy. I mean, we need more of it, obviously. That was like the kinetic part, and of course, there's a lot more to be said. You can read the article. Just to get the idea of what was going on militarily speaking. However, there's something, one aspect of this whole thing that was never really talked about, or there's or at least not in English, as far as I know. And that was the intelligence aspect of the war. So there was this guy, his name is General Jovan Milanovic, who was a military intelligence agent of the Serbian or Yugoslav army. And he was sent in late 1994, he was sent to Brussels as a military attaché. And the point is, because at the time, the sanctions against Yugoslavia were so tough, we were not allowed to send formal military officers, we were forced to send only diplomats. So what the army decided to do is they asked Lieutenant General Jovan Milanovic to take off his uniform and go as a regular diplomat. So he went there essentially undercover, and nobody knew. Like, they were not really aware that he was there. And what he did there, he spent the next 3 years. And by the way, I've almost forgot to say, when you send an agent to an area, what they do is they go through a year of training on the area that they go to, just to understand the local population, to understand the politics, to understand the culture, everything else. However, because this was an urgent situation, General Milanovic didn't have the time to get any training, so he was sent there, right away, and he had to make do with what he had. So he went there, and he spent the next 3 years creating a network of informants and people who were cooperating with him. So by 1998. He had a very robust network of informants who were telling him about what NATO was planning. So already, as I said, he went in late 1994. Already in May 1995, his network of informants was so good that he was able to acquire NATO plans for the bombing of Republika Srpska, which is a Serbian part of Bosnia, in 1995. Sorry, that was not May, that was April, actually. So he sent this plan to the general staff of the Army of Republika Srpska, and they were able to, pretty much reposition all their important military assets. And this is why NATO was not able to bomb the military and, destroy the Serbian positions in Bosnia. So, of course, NATO didn't know about this. If they did, we wouldn't be talking about the next part. And the next part is how General Milanovic prevented NATO from starting the bombing in 1998, specifically in October. So what he did is he talked to a bunch of these NATO officers, high-ranking NATO officers, especially the French. One of those guys was Major Pierre and Henri Benel, and he was an intelligence officer at the French delegation at the NATO military committee at the headquarters in Brussels. So he had contacts with this guy, and this guy had access to NATO's top, war plans for Yugoslavia. So on September 29, 1998, General Milanovic already knew that the war was supposed to start in mid-October that year. So what he did is he talked to Major Benel, and he talked to an ambassador of an unnamed country. Obviously, he didn't want to reveal the name of this guy because he would be in a lot of trouble if that happens. And these people gave them a heads up that the bombing was supposed to start on October 15, if I'm not mistaken. So on October 12, they would give us an ultimatum to get out of Kosovo, and then on October 15, the bombing would start if we refused. And of course, we refused, but just the next year. So the whole point is NATO ISR, or intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance platforms, were flying around Serbia. And they would occasionally fly once a week.
Just like they're flying now, constantly.
Yeah, just like they're flying now, exactly. While we're having protests,
No. Conspiracy theorist. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. I'm not gonna go into that. So the whole point is we had these ISR, democratic ISR, going around Serbia. And they were checking on our military to see what was going on, if we were moving, if we're not moving, if we were on the same positions, and so on. So because Milanovic acquired the war plans, he sent the war plans to Serbia. Of course, our general staff decided to reposition the entire army. So on October 3rd, 1998. NATO realized that we had some movements, but because they weren't really paying attention that much on October 3rd, they said the movements were just symbolic, right? But on October 8th, when they flew again to see what was going on, nothing was in the same place. They didn't know where the air defense batteries were. They didn't know where the tanks were. They didn't know where the large infantry formations were. And that was when the panic ensued. And on October 12, instead of an ultimatum, NATO sent a diplomatic mission to deal with the issue of Kosovo peacefully, because of course they were the ones who didn't know where we were, so they couldn't launch the attack. They were afraid that they would have much bigger losses than actually happened in 1999. So on October 15, by then, between the 12th and the 15th, we already had a much better negotiating position because of what General Milanovic did. And of course, NATO was now frantically trying to figure out what happened. How did we found out about the war plans, and who did it? They didn't know. It was General Milanovic at the time. However, by December, like in the next 2 months, they found out that it was General Milanovic, and they tried to arrest him. But the point is, he had diplomatic immunity. So he essentially just drove over to the embassy while going through a police, blockade. Like, he didn't give a damn that the police was there to arrest him. He just went in, he didn't know what's going to happen. Like, they could have shot him, they could have, arrested him, whatever. He just went with it. He was, he's an incredibly brave man. Just, for those who don't understand what really happened so far. And then he spent the next 3 days in the Serbian embassy, and the Serbian embassy was blockaded by the police. So what they were trying to do, what NATO was trying to do, is they were trying to make sure that General Milanovic stays in the embassy until his diplomatic immunity expires, and then when he gets out, they would send agents to kill him. So of course our services.
He was like an Assange before Assange, basically.
Something like that. Yeah, that's one way to put it. But like, he was a combination of Assange and Snowden at the same time. So what really happened is, like, our services found out about this plan, and they decided to send him back before before his immunity expires. So on December 18, he actually flew back to, well, in this case, not to Serbia, but to North Macedonia, but that's like another story. What I'm trying to say is the Serbian embassy sent 2 agents with him and his wife to ensure that he leaves Belgium, because this was in Brussels, obviously, to leave Belgium, and to fly back to Serbia unopposed and, without any risk for the life of General Milanovic or his wife. At the time, the Belgians had no, because of the Vienna Convention, I think it was 1815, something like that. They had no right to arrest a person with diplomatic immunity. Otherwise, they would break the Vienna Convention. And so they didn't. They decided to let him go. Let him leave the country. And because of the sanctions against Yugoslavia at the time, we transferred our entire passenger jet fleet to the Macedonians, which is why General Milanovic had to fly to Skopje instead of Belgrade. And at the time, if people remember, North Macedonia and Albania were filled with American soldiers, like 50,000 of them. So what General Milanovic did, he essentially evaded NATO in the very heart of NATO in Brussels, and then flew to North Macedonia, evaded Americans there, and flew to Niš, which is a city in southern Serbia, and that's how he, essentially escaped certain death. And then he appeared in Belgrade the next day. Of course, nobody was expecting it because, the Serbian security services kept everyone in the dark in order to make sure that NATO doesn't intercept the information about Milanovic's departure. So this is what he was able to do. And also, he prevented NATO bombing, and he then, escaped in front of their fucking noses, as we say in Serbian. And,
under their noses.
Under their noses, exactly. That's I forgot the exact term. So the whole point is, when Major Benel, the French guy who gave us the war plans, when he was arrested and when he was questioned, they wanted to make sure that he didn't, give more war secrets or military secrets to Milanovic. And of course, he only admitted that he gave NATO war plans. He didn't like give French military, secrets to Serbia or anything like that that would have jeopardized France. He just wanted to make sure that Serbia was able to defend itself against an illegal invasion by NATO. So he later admitted that he wasn't paid, and that Serbia, like what Milanovic did, he paid a lunch and like 4 bottles of wine to Benel, and that was his payment for giving us war plans, by NATO's war plans of the attack on Serbia. And this is how he essentially postponed the attack. Now, people would say, well, the attack happened either way. He didn't really do anything. Well, not really, because at the time, NATO was hoping to have the war happen during the winter, when there's a far less foliage, when it's far easier to see, enemy forces, because of course they would have to use fires, they would have to use, some sources of heat. And of course, it would be far easier for this to be picked up by ISR than was the case in the spring of 1999. So we could easily say that the war that happened in the spring was far easier for us to conduct than during winter. So what General Milanovic did cannot be quantified in words or numbers or whatever, especially because he risked his life to accomplish all this.
I love it when I'm doing something off camera, like setting something up in the background, and one of my guests is on a long explanation speech. They're talking, and then I hear that they're bringing it to an end, and then they finish and they expect me to be ready and to cut scene immediately, and I'm still 4 tabs away, and I'm like, hold on, I'll tab, okay, here, okay, yeah. So yeah, what you just said is a very serious thing, and this is a comedy show. But yes, this lieutenant general, retired, could have well saved not only or postponed that, and in so doing saved basically Serbia or Yugoslavia then from being totally annihilated, because as you pointed out, it would have been a very different campaign in the winter months.
Yeah. For those who don't know, just look at Ukrainians and Russians. If you have how do you call it, the thermovision, the thermal vision. If you look at the front line through thermal gadgets, it's far easier to see where the enemy is during the winter, because they need a heat source, right? The soldiers cannot just be in trenches and in snow and mud or whatever without some heat source, because they're going to freeze to death.
What did you say? What did you say the general's name was?
Jovan Milanovic.
Like this guy?
Oh yeah. That's right. I wonder where we got the card.
We got his autograph too. We didn't just get his business card. In any case, what were you saying? Something about something? I can't remember.
Yeah, some unimportant bullshit about ISR being more effective during the winter.
But yeah, for anybody who's not paying attention, go see the Ukraine thermal vids. It makes it pretty clear that you can't hide from thermal, or it's very difficult to hide from thermal. Almost as difficult it is to hide that you're a bot when you enter a chat, because if you enter a chat and you're like, nah, I'm not supporting any narrative, I'm just searching for the truth. Don't say that. Even if you really are searching for the truth, don't ever say that, because when you enter a chat and you say that, you're about to get kicked. You're about to get kicked, basically. Drago, I've got another meme here. Guess who it's from? The National Meme Coordination Body, who, by the way, everybody's calling a Sandvichar now, because he's also using his brain, unlike most of the other people. And
Yeah.
even
He's
Delphin, who
he's such a staunch supporter of Vucic, man. Like, it's crazy.
man, even Delphin, who I've had on, is like, no, he's a supporter. I was like, what are you talking about? And then I sent him like 72 different things, and he still didn't see them, let alone reply. I was like, read, then come back to me, and then watch those two talks instead of watching like Friends or whatever it is, Goth Friends. I don't know what's Goth Friends, because he's into goth girls, this guy. National Meme Coordination Body. Kako je čudo što su Ukrajinci postali rakvi za 10 godina, kada smo mi postali isti takvi za manje od pola godine. For the non-Serbs, what a surprise that the Ukrainians took 10 years to turn into what they did, and we turned into like jumping. If you're not jumping, you're a Moscow type of thing from like within 6 months.
Yeah. And for those who don't know what he's talking about, like, there are literally the same fucking slogans in the Maidan revolution and what's going on in Serbia now. So if people
not only the
remember,
slogans, as we've highlighted, they even did the wedding thing. They did everything. They, like every thing.
Like, you really need to be stupid, blind, deaf, uninformed, or all of those things combined not to see the pattern. So, like, they were saying "Ko ne skače, taj Moskal," which means who doesn't jump, he's a Moskal, right? Or the evil Russian, right? And now they're saying "Ko ne skače, taj je Chaci," which means who doesn't jump, that one, that person is like the supporter of the regime. Let's put it that way, to avoid convoluted and long explanations what Chaci is. So, don't you see the pattern here? And don't you see that the fact that, that this ISR that I was talking about is flying around our country, and that, military alliances are being formed around our country, and all of this, like, does it not ring a bell? Does it not like, cause you to think for a second that it might be connected somehow, just a tiny bit, maybe?
What does that mean? Think. I haven't come across this concept before.
Yeah, you're right.
I've been on TikTok
it's
for
boring.
too long.
It's better not to think. It's boring, man. Like, it really is boring.
One of the other, and I think final meme that we haven't shown in the last like month and a half that I've been off, or a month. The pump is broken on the Serbian-Croatian leader's pumping machine, and the mechanics are telling her it's going to be expensive.
Well,
the Serbian plenum leader, in case you missed all the last 15 episodes, the Serbian plenum leader ran away, let's say, to Croatia. Whereabouts still unknown, much like George.
Yeah, like she went to Croatia, the country that's forming an alliance around Serbia, a military alliance around Serbia that's not really, targeted against Serbia. So yeah. I mean, again, just another coincidence.
This is for the guys in the ISR plane flying over Bosnia. Hi, welcome to Serbian airspace. You have entered illegally. You will be shot down if you continue to fly above Republika Srpska airspace. This is your first and only warning. Please advise and behave properly in Serbian airspace. Please exit at your nearest NATO border and stay the fuck away. Because I was discussing with a guest who shall remain anonymous, that like he was wondering like if our call is being monitored. I'm like, man, they're flying over Bosnia. They could be listening to this now. And he's like, yeah, I had friends who used to work in that sector. So like, yeah, that was an actual message to them via Bluetooth right from my living room. This was identified early on as a likely outcome, also known as "I told you so" for the lame people. Drago, thanks for sticking around. At 1 hour and 4 minutes, we did it almost. Everybody who stuck around to the end, thanks. You guys make this worthwhile. It is for you. Where are you? It is for you that I do this for. Anyway, Like, share, subscribe. It gets boring to say that. Where's that one from Texas? We got that one from Texas. We'll do that one from Texas. Like, share, and subscribe. R.I.P. Texas.